Welcome to another episode of Left on Red podcast. I am Jen, also known as Booking Jordan.
And I'm Dwayne.
Okay, so we are back with another episode of Left on Red podcast, which I'm so excited because we're going to be talking about The Vanishing Half by Brit, Bennett, which I freaking love this book so much, y'all know. But I thought it would actually go well with current stuff that's going on right now. Black is King dropped, y'all. Black is King by Beyonce, a film. It was released, and you're probably like, how do the two go together? Well, this book, it starts off with two sisters who are light-skinned, from this intentionally light-skinned town in Louisiana, and the paths that their journey takes on. So it talks about like colorism, racism, all that. We're going to get into that. But how affirming is it that we have Beyonce release Black is King, which talks about so much, and it's literally almost like a love letter, I feel, to Black people, which seems to be a theme with Beyonce as of late with all of her art projects that she has been releasing. But my goodness, I freaking loved it. So many thoughts. What are some of your thoughts, Dwayne?
I thought it was incredible. I mean, really, like when I was looking at it, I'm thinking like she's her. Like and what I mean by that is she's the truth.
Wait, she's not Jesus.
Not the way, the truth, and the light. I'm just talking about just like we call Paul Pierce the truth.
I know you did not compare Beyonce to Paul Pierce.
But you know, I'm not saying it in a
You would have to say LeBron James or Michael Jordan.
What I'm trying to say is I'm not describing it in a religious type way. And I know, but anyway, I just thought everything was dope. The energy was crazy. I thought that, like, when I think about doing like a creative project, like that's how I would want it to turn out. I feel like almost all the scenes where they set out to accomplish something, they accomplished it. Like the look and the feel and the energy that came across was different than what we usually get to see. It felt really high quality.
Yeah, it's so crazy because it was so many looks and it was regal. Black is the future. Black is the past. Black is everything. Like, it really is. And that's what I felt watching it. And I loved that she really showed like the advancedness of Black culture, African culture, and also how that transcends lineage-wise throughout. Because like on some of the scenes, it's like back and forth between times, and you're like seeing some of it is ancestral, some of it is current, some of it is like, and it's all just so beautiful and magnificent and amazing. And it's crazy because when you say like that's how you would want your art to be, like I think that true great creative amazing art inspires you to want to do art. Like it inspires something within you to want to create, and just and something about that just gave you life, or at least I should say me gave me life, made me feel replenished, rejuvenated, especially with the darkness that we have been experiencing really all throughout ever. But you know, right now it's really grim. The images that we're seeing, a lot of the trauma and stuff that we're seeing, to see something that is so life-giving was beautiful. And I'm not even talking about just the hairstyles and the outfits. And I need a book. I was telling my friends, I need an editorial book released, published, of all of the looks, all of the hairstyles, all of the fashion, all of the inspiration behind it. What countries did this originate from? That would be like a dream. I just went on a whole rant.
Yeah, no, that's cool, because I totally agree. And just adding on to that, like the music, like, because we had heard this album before, and it was pretty good. Times, it kind of put the music in a different light, and I was hearing things in a way that I felt like I didn't hear them. Like, so that's another piece that was a part of it. Like, it almost feels like Beyonce is her own kind of sub-genre of R&B / hip hop thing. Because when you think about R&B now, you think of kind of, it's a simplistic, not simplistic.
But she used a lot of African artists and stuff, so it's a lot of African music. And I think what's cool is because a lot of people are using Afro beats, and they're calling it Afro beats, but they're using it in this mainstream pop way. But she used it in an actual African artist to showcase their art, and she's not trying to mold their art into her thing. It's kind of like an equal collaboration. So I felt like it was an organic sound.
I kind of halfway take that back. but I'm also talking about the way she uses her voice on the songs, in addition to how her songs sound really wide. Mm-hmm. I also don't have a perspective on, I guess, the care that was given towards being true to the African representations.
Yeah.
All that is kind of filtered through my, I guess,
African American
or African American view. So that's the one thing I do want to point out.
You know, when you said that we heard this album, but this brought a different element, I feel like the visual album made the music come alive. I listened to these songs so many times. It was like I was hearing the music for the first time.
Yeah, it felt like, did we listen? Is this the same album?
Yeah.
It's kind of the way.
Even though she tweaked some, like they added some gems and tweaked some things. And of course, adding spoken word and all that other stuff always brings a different element. But some of the song is exact, like even Brown Skin Girl, of course. Okay, so we could talk about Brown Skin Girl. Brown Skin Girl was the moment I teared up, like, and I cried. I'm like, I can't believe I'm crying about something. Like, it's like, why are you tearing up? But even thinking about it, it's like teary. Like, just seeing Blue Ivy, you know, she introduces kind of the song into it and she closes it out, and that's her daughter. And you have Beyonce, who's known, you know, Beyonce is known for her beauty. Beyonce, that is something everybody always talks about. She's so beautiful, all this stuff. So it was crazy when she had a daughter that people were picking out some of the things that are associated with being black as negative. Like, that was the narrative that was happening. And Beyonce, not on her watch. She shifted all of that around and used her voice to emphasize and promote anything that's black. Broader nose, darker skin, all of that white supremacy has just made it in every culture, in every facet. Anything that's closer to white beauty standards is on the top. And I feel like something about that, and seeing Blue and knowing that about her story too, was wow. And then also the little brown skinned girl, clearly, and then you're seeing like beautiful people like Naomi Campbell. Like, it's just crazy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy to think about. But yeah, that girl at the end of the brown skin girl, when she had the smile, if you guys know what I'm talking about, something about her smiling at that end, it was just like so, it's crazy what they do. Like, when I say they, like society.
Yeah.
And yeah, anyways. Also, okay, I'm going on a happier note. I want to switch it because that was a happy, beautiful moment, but it's rooted in some probably sad stuff. What would be your favorite look? I was like, bruh, you can't even ask me that. What would be my favorite look? I think now, since I've watched it 3 times, I may have favorite scenes, like favorite songs.
I go into that.
But I'm not sure. I was going to say, but I'm not sure.
I liked all of it. I mean, I liked all the scenes. I liked a lot of the dancing scenes. Like, so there were 3 scenes that I liked that I kind of stand out in my mind. I've only seen it one time. That would be the dude in the blue paint when he was dancing with Beyonce.
Which was throughout.
I only remember them in the white room.
Oh, in that white room, okay.
The one time, I feel like that's the only time it happened, maybe at the end. Then there was the lady in the pink
hair?
No, I don't know if she had pink hair or not, but I feel like the way they made her look, she seemed kind of tall. It was her and then 2 other people on the side of her dancing. And then the lady who was rapping, I guess you could call it rapping, who was dancing with the big hat that had the dangly stuff on it. And it was similar to the thing that was around her waist. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was cool too.
Yeah, there's so many scenes. A lot of the aspects seem so futuristic, and the whole thing on the stars, you know, in Lion King, they talk about the ancestors are in the stars and all that stuff, and then them showing that, and something about the visual effects. I know we were talking about it felt 3D throughout, but that really felt like shoo shoo, all the stuff. Like, anytime it was like planet-wise.
Shoo shoo.
That's what I'm doing the worst on explaining it. But even with Beyonce's outfits, it was like shimmering stars and all that planet thing. It was just so much. And even when she was in that like ring of fire thing, and they had her twirling, and they had the cars doing the freaking donuts at the same time, and it was like matching that speed. I mean, if you haven't watched it, you're probably listening to, like, what is she describing? But when you see it, it's like flabbergasting. And also Beyonce in the middle of the freaking ocean, which I'm like, how did they make it look like she was literally in the middle of the ocean? Because there's no way you would be floating in the middle of the ocean, but it looked so seamless and beautiful.
There was like a lot of cool things. I mean,
the hair, when her hair was all the way down there, all those stories for the Pharrell song, that's another one. The girl with the pink hair with her wedding, which we were following basically their kind of love story, almost her and her man's love story throughout the film, from when they were little to all then. And that wedding, I was like, I would love to have a vow renewal or ceremony or something, just so all my guests could be stunted like that. Because that was okay, I'll stop going on a rant, but that was the thing with that wedding. The girl with the blue, and she had her hair done, and it starts off on her. I was like, oh my God. I thought it was going to be about her, and then it shifted. She was just a guest or a bridesmaid or something at homegirl's wedding. Like, all of the guests and everything, it was just so, like, even with having Lion King, the album The Gift, and you make a movie, Lion King, that all these kids are going to watch, and you're making them also have to recognize Black African culture that inspired this film, you know, by having Black is King. Like, how many little kids are like, ooh, I want to watch Black is King? Like, even saying that out loud is affirming from a society that doesn't affirm Black people. So it was just awesome. What are your thoughts about if you was one of Beyonce's kids, one of the twins? How would you be like, Mama, I would have really liked to let me not take that. Okay. I'm not trying to get our podcast canceled. Okay, so I could literally talk about Black is King for forever, but we can't. But I'm going to talk about something else that had me replenished and feeling, but from literature. And this is one of the best books that I have read in a long time. The Vanishing Half by Brit, Bennett. So, what do you know about this book?
I know I keep seeing the cover everywhere, so I know it's pretty popular.
Yes, that is true. The cover is like everywhere. If you look at the cover, it actually tells you pretty much exactly what the book's about, but not really. It's really based on two identical twin sisters, Stella and Desiree, who are from a small town called Mallard. And this town is a Black town. It's an African-American town that was founded by actually one of their ancestors. And it is predominantly filled with very light skinned, almost passing individuals. So people from out of state, when they come to this area, it's like almost like, what? Is this really a town full of Negroes, as they put it, I think, in the book, or not? And you're following Stella and Desiree, these two twin sisters, and the way their lives diverge. So it's kind of from the start of it, you're already seeing that even though this town is technically full of privileged people within the Black community, they're very much oppressed. They do not have the same access that white people have, even though if you look on face value, they are white. So it really poses a good question of what qualifies somebody as white. Is whiteness a thing? Is that even real? Or is it just clearly a made up construct of a way to have a different caste system? Because early on, you find out about the education access that's limited. A pretty defining moment within their childhood actually takes place where Stella and Desiree's father was murdered by a white mob. And it just kind of shows you that even though these individuals, technically, if you say it's based on skin color, they're white, they're not white because of this made up society. So that already kind of has you like interested, like, where's this going?
So that does have me interested in where it's going. So did this author feel like it was a book to educate people about colorism or race?
You know, I don't know. That's a good point. I don't know. I think colorism and race, all of it, I think she not plays with those concepts, but she plays on that a bit. It's so reminiscent of, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but it's very reminiscent. I said this in my wrap up like a month or so ago, that it reminds me of Nella Larsen's Passing but also God Help the Child by Toni Morrison. So I'll say the beginning of the book is very much like Nella Larsen's passing, which it does play on that whole colorism, but also it's these two sisters that could pass. One of them decides to pass, that sister being Stella, and the other one deciding, not really deciding, but just remaining within being a black woman. And Stella, she decides to pass for access, to have more access. Her education was stunted. She didn't have the same opportunities. They grew up, they were working in a white person's house, cleaning. That's what their mother did. That's what they had to do. And if you look at all these individuals on face value, they all look the same. But once she realized, hey, I could pass when people don't know, and I could just have an easier life, she took that route. So I don't know exactly if that was the author's intent, but that's just one aspect of it, because this story, the reason why I said it's also like Toni Morrison's God Help the Child is because it also follows their daughters. So both Stella and Desiree, they end up having daughters. One of them, Desiree, has a daughter with a very dark-skinned black man. So her daughter actually comes out very dark-skinned, to the point like people don't even believe that that's her mother. Like, they don't even see the resemblance. And then Stella ends up having a daughter with a white man who doesn't know she's black. Not trying to do the air quotes, but doesn't know that she's black. And she has a daughter who is white and has no idea of her background. So it kind of follows that. So it touches on that, but then it touches on like domestic violence. It touches on, not too heavily, like queer identity is represented in this book, but it doesn't touch too heavily on some of the kind of casting out that happens within there, but there is a little bit of that as well. A lot of the theme is kind of on these little small decisions that each individual makes that ends up kind of turning their life in a completely different direction.
Gotcha.
Like, my first thoughts when reading this, it's like, I guess first, do you know anybody, or have you had any history of knowing someone who has chose to pass? It doesn't necessarily have to be mean in the way of passing with race, but in any way that you want to take that.
I've heard stories just in terms of like, in my family, like if people were traveling and the one person who could pass would like maybe go get food in a white only place or something like that, but I don't know of anybody like doing it intentionally for long periods of time.
Yeah, and that in itself, like when you say that in itself, it gives me like anxiety. Like my heart, I just immediately was thinking of whoever that family member was who had to do it even for that moment. Like I would be scared of being found out. Like if I ever had, that access privilege, that in itself is kind of like risking yourself for the betterment, of your family, to try to get basic things that should be available to everybody. And it's interesting because that's kind of how it starts with Stella. So Stella, we find out that she's done little periods of passing when she was a kid to like try to go to a museum or do little things. And that's kind of when she realized white people can't tell. Black people, for some reason, she realized early on, they would know, kind of. But the white people, they just wouldn't know. And I was like, that's funny because I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, and I feel like people, like, even when they see somebody who they think might be, will play around and act like, I don't know. Like, there's a few people, but we won't go into it. But, yeah, we do. Even when we know the person might be white, we'll still be like,
they look like they might be. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. But anyways, really what makes her kind of do it full time, even at this time she's still part-time, was when her and her sister decided to leave Mallard to go to New Orleans for better job opportunities. Even though Stella was very talented with computers and typing and all that, she couldn't get a job because they were only looking for white people. They weren't going to hire no colored person. So they're like, look, just put on your thing that you're white so you could get this job. So as soon as she said she was white, then she got a job. And that's how it started. So now she's in the workforce, and she really just starts off with her trying to get a job so they could survive and send money back to their mother. Somehow that happens, and she gets an opportunity, I guess, by falling in love. I don't know if she really fell in love or even he did, but the guy was interested in her, and he's a white man, and he thinks of her as white, and he's offering her to move out and them to get married. And she's like, she literally left in the middle of the night, left her sister, everything without anybody knowing, and left her life behind her and never looked back. And for me, reading this, it was so frustrating because I am mad at Stella. Like, I'm really actually mad at her. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm not saying the decisions that she made were right, but it's almost like you can fault her, but you can't. It's a very complicated situation, at least for me when I was reading. I know I feel like this character is going to get mixed reviews as far as people are either going to really, really hate her, or people are going to empathize a little bit, kind of like me, and still think it wasn't the best decision. But what I'm really mad at is not really Stella. I'm really mad at white supremacy, not her, because it kind of forced her to make these decisions almost. And it's weird because as the story progresses, Stella becomes, to me, more and more white. Like, she's literally white in every sense of the word of trying to protect her little thing. Like, she has like an irrational fear of kind of black people, in the sense of she doesn't want them in her neighborhood. She doesn't want them near her, even though the entire neighborhood is in agreement. They're all white, and they're like, we can't let these Negroes come up in here and dirty our property value, and how could they? And she's the first one leading them up, even though she's usually soft-spoken. She's like, no, we can't do this. And it's interesting because hers comes from a fear of being found out, and theirs is almost I don't know what theirs is, but it's just you're not going to get in on this access. Hers is, you're not going to remove my access. Mm-hmm. I ain't trying to get in no type of drama. And through this, what I loved about the book is it introduces us. I say it's about Stella and Desiree and then their daughters, but it introduces us to so many supporting characters. One of them being at the time where Stella is living this new life with her white husband. She has a neighbor that does end up moving in, Loretta, and there's this black couple that can afford to move in solely because the husband is in films, is an actor. And Loretta, for those of you guys who don't know, this is going to be turned into an HBO miniseries, and I'm so excited to see the casting. I hope they get this right, but I loved Loretta. I would have loved to just had more time with Loretta and really to see inside her household. Like, she to me was like fabulous. Like, I just see her, I picture like Thelma from Good Times, a little bit older maybe, but that's kind of what I picture. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
It makes me think about the nature versus nurture things. A lot of the experiments that they do regarding nature versus nurture deals with twins, I think, who are like either separated through, adoption or something like that. So it reminds me of stuff like that, and how we think about, how much of it is who you are and how much of it is your environment and things like that. But
yeah, because it's interesting, because even though Stella technically goes on to live as a white woman, and I say she becomes white in every sense of the word, she really doesn't, because deep down in her head, she still has the shadow of knowing that she's black. So she doesn't ever feel free. You would think going into this situation she would feel free, but she always has the fear of people finding out. She can never really get too close to anybody. The only person she actually did end up getting close to was Loretta, who was also black, but she didn't want other people to know about that. I want to talk about that a little bit, because there's a point in there where Loretta has a daughter, and Loretta's daughter is playing with Stella's daughter, Kennedy, and Stella comes out there and she's like, we don't play with niggers. We don't play with N-words. And she like smacks her daughter and all this other stuff later for her daughter, I think, basically repeating the word to the little girl. And it broke my heart to know that this black family, like this other black family, has to have, like, you know, the hurt and the heartache of racism. You know how horrible that is, and you just perpetuated it in a way that is going to probably scar this family forever. And it's just like, it's just crazy. And it just shows how so much of that stuff is just carried on,
right,
like through parents or whatever the case is. And it was funny because Kennedy, she was even like, she almost couldn't believe that her mother would be black, because it's like, she grew up in a household where she heard them talking about race.
Right, it wouldn't make sense. Yeah,
it wouldn't make sense. And yeah, it's just
So, do you have?
No, I would like.
So, what would make someone, a black person, read this at this time? Because from my view, it feels like it's just talking to us about trauma repeatedly, over generations. And it's like, right now, why would I be interested in domestic violence and racism through generations?
And so there's 2 points to that. When we say now, there's never a point somebody's going to be interested in that. Just like we never.
I guess I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah, no, I know you're speaking for yourself, but I'm saying like now, I know it's probably a little bit more visualized, but this is just something that's not new. It's something that we all are aware of regardless of time.
True.
So I'm always reading nonfiction, fiction, and whatever. And I almost want to do a separate video on that, talking about that topic in general. But specifically for this book is not one where the trauma is the focus. The trauma that happens is more just something that helps to explain. It does explain a little bit of the background, but really the story, it feels more like everyday life. Like you're kind of on this everyday life of seeing how these characters are going to develop. Through Reese and Jude, it's a lot of love. So you're so warped in their healthy relationship. You know, of course, it's not perfect, but you're warped into that feeling of that support and having each other. And then a lot of the focus, again, is on Desiree and Early and seeing that relationship. So it's a lot about relationships, not so much about these small moments. Like even the moments when they're described, it's good to note for people so they know there's triggers in this book, but the book is pretty thick and it's explained shortly or quickly, but well enough where you could do the layers yourself to understand how this could mold this character into some of these things. So to answer your question, the reason why is because it's not trauma porn. It's not done in an exploitative way. It's done in a way that's not the focus. You may hear that, but really it's the relationships that these people have. And also you're trying to figure out if Stella's really going to not get away with this, but is nobody ever going to find out that she's black? Like it has a little bit of that suspense of trying to figure out how is this going to tie out in their lives, or what effect is this going to have on Kennedy, her daughter? What effect is this going to have on Jude? Like, what did the decision for her mom to come back to a town that's all light skinned and raise your dark skinned daughter there, is this going to have long-term effects on her later on in life? So it's really about these decisions and thinking of how those are going to play out.
Okay. So you mentioned 2 other books. What were they?
God Help the Child by Toni Morrison and Nella Larsen's Passing.
So out of those 3 books, what would you recommend people read first?
Oh, I don't think it matters the order. Like, honestly, it doesn't matter. When I say that this book is kind of like, it reminds me of it reminds me in the sense of themes. Because Nella Larsen Passing is literally following 2 friends who are really light skinned, and one of them decides to go off and pass as white. And she's living in constant fear of being found out. And then she kind of wants to have the secret black life because she's so isolated. She feels she needs that, which you see in this book. And for God Help the Child, it's reminiscent because it's about a light-skinned mother who ends up having this dark-skinned child and no one really thinking it's her child. And this is not exactly the same, but the daughter has to experience a lot of colorism and later in life has people admiring her for her beauty and all this other stuff where she embraces it. But a lot of the hate against her being dark actually came directly from her mother. That's where it's kind of a little bit different. But it follows how these decisions that these parents make ends up affecting their kids down the line.
So one thing that I'm really not sure of is white people's understanding of passing or their relationship with black people passing. Not that it's important.
Yeah, I was about to say.
But it is important because,
is
yeah, because the life and death is pretty much in their hands.
And I don't know if white people talk about it. I'd be like, I hardly ever think, I know that sounds funny, but I hardly ever think about what they be thinking. But I get what you're saying in the case of life or death. But I think it's not even so much about the passing. I think the passing is more so talking about what people did, but it's really more so about the constructs and the caste systems that force these scenarios, and also about how all of this is not real. Like, it just shows even more how it's not real, like, at all. And it calls it out in a way where it's almost like an illusion. Like, it depends on what you want to see. One of the sections of the book I thought was interesting was later on, because Stella has become a white woman, she even talks different. Like, everything about her is just different. The way she carries herself is different because she's been having years of this privilege or whatever it is.
Black women do that too.
They do. But I'm saying for the sake of this book, I know what they were saying. Like, there's a scene where she early sees her, and remember, she's identical twin sisters with Desiree, someone who he's in love with. He sees her, he sees a white woman, and that probably has a lot to do with the way she's looking around, the fear or whatever it is, the way she's carrying her stuff. And it's just interesting because she's been in this lifestyle, so the way she's perceived is a white woman, even though she has an identical twin sister. When you immediately see her, you will see a black person if you know her. Like, so I don't know, I just think that's just interesting. It's just interesting. Because even with Mariah Carey, like, if you see Mariah Carey, what do you see?
Black, a mixed person.
So you
black.
see, yeah. See, and I see that too. I think when I was younger, when I first saw her, I didn't know.
I mean, I think they tried to market her more that way, but I never thought that she wasn't mixed. I mean, it could have just been the music I was like, okay, this is...
That's somebody, if someone says it, then you know. But you're not going to just immediately, you know what I mean? No, and it's just weird as to what does that no mean? That one drop rule is just crazy. But yeah. I mean,
it ain't one drop in her case, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but that's my point with the one drop rule. They're saying if they find anybody who's identically black in your lineage, you're somehow black. So with that description, do you have any interest in either reading the book or watching the series? You can be honest.
So for watching the series, yeah, we'll probably have to wait to the trailer. I mean, at this point, I feel like it's not really for me.
Yeah.
This book isn't for me.
It's so crazy because I love this book so much, but you know what? I don't think it's for you either.
I'm just not able to connect with it, and it's not really on themes that I necessarily would be interested in reading a story about. It's stuff I talk about or might have a casual conversation about, but in terms of reading a whole book about it, it's not the type of thing that
you would do. Yeah, you would be interested in.
Necessarily interested in, but I don't know, maybe depending on the trailer and I can really visualize where they're going with the plot and how it's organized, I could potentially check it out.
You know what? I'm interested to see that trailer too, because I could see how this could be. I wonder how they're going to market it. I wonder if it's going to be like a suspense thing or if it's going to be like a casual drama. It'll be interesting to see if it's more on the suspense side, kind of like Underground or whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like if they do it in that type of, not exactly, but kind of like that moment to moment situation of people leaving behind things just for a chance at a better life or a life that's not as oppressed. But yeah, so that kind of sums it up. You guys clearly know I love this book. I raved about it. I gave this 5 stars. I do think this is an amazing read, and I'm not saying it's going to be for everybody. It may not be for Dwayne, but I do think if you like good character building, like if when you read, you love characters that become real people and become alive and they're fully developed and multifaceted, I think you'll enjoy this book. I'm not saying if you don't enjoy it that you don't like those things, but I think that's the real appeal of this book. But yeah, that's all I have. Is there anything else that you have?
Nope. That's it.
Okay, well, we'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure to leave us 5 stars on Apple, to share this podcast with whomever, as well as rate us on Spotify if that's where you're listening. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't have and give it a thumbs up. And I'd also like to know your thoughts on the book if you've read it. And let me know if you was more on the Dwayne spectrum or if you were more on my spectrum of interest level. All right, catch y'all on the next one. Bye.